You're not human. That's hurtful. Are you that guy with the evil powers? I think everyone has dark urges. It's kind of my thing.
Welcome, adventurers, to this episode of the Who Writes with Monsters podcast. I'm D. Allen.
And I'm Donnie B. How are we doing today?
I'm doing good. And, it's the 5th episode, and based on some fan interactions, I realized I've never asked you how you're doing. So how are you doing today, Donnie?
I am doing really well, actually. I am excited to be on episode 5. It seems like we're chugging along. Being here, being able to talk to you about this is just incredible. And I really appreciate the opportunity, man.
Absolutely. For any new listeners out there, we are covering the He Who Fights with Monsters book series, and today we're on chapters 15 through 17.
Yes, we are. And if you've been with us since episode 1, welcome back. You were with us here. Last time we talked about the Sanguine Horror fight in the Ritual Chamber. We got to see a little bit about Gary, Farah, and Rufus, their team dynamics, and really how they click. We ended off right as they exited the Ritual Chamber into the above desert, and then we learned about Heidels.
We did learn about Heidels. Those things are possibly weird. But now we are without a Heidel and about to cross through a desert, which is the best team building exercise I think we could have. Forget a fun run. Let's do a fun run in the desert.
Absolutely, and I'm sure fun is the key adjective here.
Yes, sir. So yeah, on today's episode, the party's going through the desert. They just left the blood pit and they are on their way to the Vain Estate to loot, see what they can find. And while they cross through the desert, we get to have a fun little conversation about outworlders, what they are, and what they do. Donnie, why don't you give us a little info on some outworlders?
Yeah, we learned a little bit about outworlders from Rufus, whose family runs a school, as we are reminded here. He's seen outworlders before. Take that shot.
Yeah, take that shot.
He's seen outworlders before, and we learned that they're often created by an accidental summoning mishap. So what happens is you take this individual from their world, and they get sucked into a world often with high concentrations of magic.
Right.
And they're transformed from whatever race they were, in Jason's case, human, into an outworlder. And they're given special racial abilities to help them survive in this new world. This is where Jason's interface and his quest system and his map all come from. They're all tools that he can use to survive in this new world. So that's basically what an outworlder is and where they come from.
Right. So it's interesting that you mentioned his his guide ability, his interface ability, because it's mentioned that outworlders will get a form of guide, not necessarily Jason's interface, but some form of guide that helps them navigate this new world that they're in. And when I read that, it made the creative juices flow. And I was thinking what kind of other guides might there be? I mean, initially the first thought I had was like an animal guide. It's like a familiar that acts as a guide in this new world. So essentially maybe you have a person whose entire livelihood is talking to animals. So when he brings them in to the new world, he just automatically gets some familiar power to talk to animals to guide him through the new world. You know what I mean?
I think the only other outworlder ability we really see is Farah's ability, the power bond. Where she links up minds with somebody that she truly trusts and vice versa, and can just learn things through their mind, through that connection. Because that's what makes sense to her. I don't think we really see any other outworlder abilities, any other outworlder guides. Despite there being several outworlders through the series. Even when Taika becomes an outworlder, we don't really see any of his racial abilities.
Right.
So
That's
it's an
true.
interesting thought. We can like to think about what makes sense. I'm assuming that most of the people that came from Earth have a similar like computer and or video game based guide because that's what they're familiar with. They're all from the same time, the same area. So I think it would be interesting to see more of that.
Do you think that if a Leonid was brought as an outworlder to somewhere else, it would have like a ball of string as a guide?
I can't be certain, but I feel like that's racist.
Oh man. Could it be?
I don't know. Does Gary seem like the kind of guy to run around chasing a ball of string? Don't answer that.
Don't answer that.
Yeah.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Now,
Fair
on a
enough.
more, come on, man. We're trying to do a serious thing here. You know, everyone's looking at us. No, on a serious thought about Leonids, though.
Yeah.
I realized that I can't really think of any like mythology in human, like real world human mythology that involves like a cat-headed man of any sort. You know, plenty of different types of cryptids, but I don't think I've ever really seen a cat-headed cryptid. Can you? I can't think of any.
No, really the only creature that comes to mind with the combination of cat and human would be a sphinx. And that's just the body of a cat with the head of a human.
Well, now that you say that, I'm almost sure there's probably an Egyptian god that has got a cat head of sorts.
Oh, there absolutely is. I can't think of it at the top of my head.
And that's racism.
But yeah. Thanks.
No, but I think it's interesting though, because you know, most of the other species in the, you know, in actually really most of any fantasy, you know, there is some real world mythology that you could base them off of. So I guess I mean maybe the Egyptian thing could fit, but I just can't think of like a prominent cat-headed cryptid.
Here's a thought. What is a Garuda? Because that's a lion and an eagle, right? Or is it just an eagle warrior?
I believe in this series, I believe it's just like bird person, you know, like man with eagle head. Garuda on the whole, I think could be lion eagle, but I'm really not entirely sure.
I didn't.
I know
I didn't
in the
research
Legend
the
of
question.
Zelda, there's the Gerudo Valley, but those are like the big rock things, so that's
Not quite the same.
not quite the same way. Is that the Gerudos?
I don't know. It's been
I
too
don't
long
know.
since I played it.
Someone link us up with a Legend of Zelda podcast, and we'll figure that out.
Yes. I think on the whole, I think this is just Shirtaloon's way of including like a fantasy world that would be recognizable to the greater population while also incorporating new ideas, you know, like the Leonids. I think they're just a
Right.
brainchild of Shirtaloon himself. And they're
Yeah.
just this cool, fun thing that hasn't been done yet. And he made it work really well. But also allowed us to keep
Okay. Sorry, I was going to say that may not be the case though, because there are plenty of cat-headed creatures in media. You got what Thundercats are an immediate one I can think of. So it's not that cat-headed things don't exist. There's just no like I can't think of any other mythology, I guess, than the Egyptology.
Almost the right word, but no, I see what you're saying. I mean, you don't. A lot of these other races you would find in like D&D and fantasy worlds and stuff. Whereas in this context, I feel like Leonids are more of a novel idea.
Sure, yeah. Um but it's really cool. Either way, I like the concept of a Leonid, just like a big lion man in a business suit is just a great idea.
Yes, I agree. If I could get back to the racial abilities for a second,
Mm,
there was something while reading through these chapters that really stood out to me that I feel like is a big oversight, and I just want to get your opinion on it, right?
okay.
So while we're looking through racial abilities, Jason's learning about all this. He asks Rufus, he's like, "Hey, because my world doesn't have any magic, is that why I never had abilities before? And I'm in this world now, but that's why I have abilities now." And Rufus is like, "Well, I don't know. It's very possible." And then in the very next page, he describes how his and Farah's racial abilities, being human, evolved with their essence choices, right? And that's how humans
Mm,
work. Their racial abilities evolve and take on the shape of whatever essences they have, aside from faster XP gain and stuff. And I
right.
feel like Rufus, especially, you know, being a teacher in himself and having that generational teaching in his blood, would absolutely pick up on the fact that Jason's been calling himself human this entire time, and just be able to explain, well, you might have had racial abilities, but you didn't have any essences, so they wouldn't have manifested into anything. Um, so he wouldn't be able to use them without the magic of essences. True, but he, as a human, should have had those same racial abilities, just not unlocked yet.
Dude, that is crazy. I hadn't even thought of that. Uh when we had talked about this before, humans' abilities were or other species' abilities were inflexible, and humans on Palamustis would, be flexible with abilities. But what I hadn't considered is that in the low magic zone of Earth, all the humans that exist there probably did and do have racial abilities that they don't know about until they get their essences.
Yeah, and that's probably true. That's um, something I always imagine, like with the network, when they choose to create essence users. Those essence users go through the same racial gift evolutions every time they absorb the essence. And I'm sure they have some research department that's been able to connect extra abilities when this happens. But it's impossible to really determine for sure without all the resources and knowledge of Palamustis. Um, but it's like, I feel like every human on Earth would have the inherent dormant racial abilities of any human anywhere. But I feel like even as he explains it about himself, he would have been like, well, actually, you probably did have racial abilities, just not awoken yet. It's just one thing that slipped my mind. He's like, oh, you're from another world. Magic doesn't work the same way. It's like, yeah, it does. It really does.
Well, I mean, technically speaking, it doesn't have to. These worlds just happen to be linked.
Mm. That's if we jump ahead a little bit to book 11, we find out that with the sundering of the throne, the cause and effect of magic was stabilized. So magic did a very specific thing all of the time, everywhere. That's just the way it works. With the unsundering of the throne, started to change how magic worked. That's why when you combine essences, your confluence is always the same for every time you combine those essences. That happens because the throne was sundered. And when Jason undid that, as we saw with Emmy,
Yeah.
as we saw with Emmy, you know, the confluence she got wasn't supposed to be there, and that's where we got the explanation of, well, magic doesn't work the way it used to anymore. So I feel like in this particular instance, at this time when the throne had been sundered, all of magic behaves consistently everywhere. That's just the way it works. And it has for centuries.
See, you have such an eye for these little details. I'm over here like, man, this isn't even in my ballpark. I wouldn't have thought to even think about this.
Yeah, I thought about it while I was reading these chapters for this episode, because I was reading through it, and it's like, well, I don't have any magic on my world. Is that why? And in my head, I was like, well, no, you were just human. Then you didn't have any essences, so no racial abilities. And that's what picked out. Like I was having that conversation with him while I was taking my notes. I was like, wait a minute, this doesn't add up to what I think is happening. I think we're diving way too deep into this for book one. We can get into it a little bit later.
Yeah, for sure.
Let's get back to the team. They're trekking through the desert while this whole conversation is going on, not getting nearly as deep into it as we are. Well, the one thing I really loved about this scene in particular, as they're going through the desert, you know, Jason is suffering from mana toxin really bad. And the only thing that he can do to keep himself conscious and living is drink water, which Farah happens to have a great supply of. And it's pointed out that you know, she doesn't usually need water. None of them need water. So he's lucky she even had it. And it is my firm belief that it is this moment right here, this decision that saves his life overall, that turns Jason into the prepper that we see later on in the series when he becomes his own adventurer.
That is fair. I literally have written in my notes, Farah is prepped, but for who?
But for who? I think she's just prepped. And to be fair, all of her powers are fire. So perhaps she was using the water as a last resort in case your fire gets too out of hand.
That's a good point. This whole time, I'm like, none of the people around, not even Anisa, need food or water. Like, on what purpose does she even have water?
And it could be as simple as she's an adventurer. You know, she's there to save people. And if the people she's saving are normal rank people, maybe some water is what they need at some point. So she's carrying it as like a first aid kit kind of thing. Just like an extra little bit that you would carry for people who may need it, you know, that she runs into out in the Delta. In this case, happens to be Jason. You know, she just prepared, like maybe there's a town out there. She's like, well, I'm not going to give you one of my valuable stamina potions when all you need is a water. You know, here, little kid, take this bottle of water.
Well, as we know, he couldn't take a stamina potion at this moment if he wanted to anyway.
Yeah.
And she would have absolutely given him one if he could, because I think she even says he needs it more than we do, but
yeah, she was, it's a shame, really. Man, too bad you can't have one of these. Drink your water, peasant.
So
but no, we see later on that Jason is super prepared for literally anything. There's a whole scene about it with Clive and Humphrey, and I think it's this moment right here. He was like, well, her preparedness saved my life. Maybe I should be that prepared too.
For real. And he really does stay prepared the entire time. He's never not prepared.
No, he's even that takes me back to that takes me forward to when Belinda gets her powers, you know, and her essences are basically utility. And, you know, even then she's like complaining, like, oh, well, I can create anything that as long as it's simple, you know, I can do anything. He's like, this is stupid. And Jason's like, do you have any idea how much inventory space I could just clear out if I had those powers? It's like he is maxed out on inventory space with random useless junk. all just in case he needs it. He's like, well, I mean, if I could just do that, just
I
put Belinda
know.
in your inventory, be like, here, create this thing for me.
Just keeping a Belinda in your inventory. I love that.
Yes.
So as they're going through the desert though, they're and having this conversation with Jason, there's a line that when I read it completely differently than how Heath Miller reads it in the audiobook.
Mhm.
And I genuinely think it's one of the funnier lines from the beginning of the book, but the delivery in the audiobook kind of walks right over it. You don't really notice it. But the line is, the evil cult lady's son. He blamed me for ruining his magic thing. But I think that if he had delivered the line in a more childish manner, it would have come off a lot funnier because it's written in a very childish manner. Just evil cult lady's son blamed me for ruining his magic thing. Like, he's ill-informed of anything in the situation, so he's just talking as a kid would who doesn't know how to explain it. I think the line could have been way funnier if he would have leaned into the delirium of being heat exhausted, you know?
Yeah. Oh yeah, like that evil cult lady, man. Her son. Yeah, it could have come off as uh a lot funnier, but I do think the seriousness of it leading to the outworlder conversation, puts it more of a this is what's going on, this is what we're learning today type situation.
Right.
Because he does mean it in a serious tone. That's just the words that he can use to describe it. But
Yeah,
also good and funny.
that's true. That's true. And maybe I just kind of am always looking for the joke. So in my mind, I'm like, oh, there was another one. Missed one there.
Yeah. Missed one there.
Because literally just a few lines later, um, in a retort to nearly dying, like Rufus is talking shit to him. And he's like, you nearly died. And his reply is, whoa.
Right. I go, oh. Oh yeah. Speaking of lines, so I got something here. As they're coming through the desert, they're finishing up their magic outworlder talk, and discussing the next steps of what's going on. And one of the lines that I picked out is when they're going through, and Jason has one essence. They're talking about more essences, and Rufus is like, "Yeah, we'll help you find more essences, and then we'll teach you how to use them." You know, and at this, Jason's like, "Well, I mean, I already have a couple extras." And the line that I picked out there is important to me for two reasons. First, because considering the cost of essences in general, both in labor and in money, of this
Mhm.
world, the offer to just find and give him more essences is an offer of gratitude. These are
Right.
these are things that people spend their entire lives saving up to try and give to their kids. Just the ability to get one or two essences, and Rufus is like offering to give him essences. So that I think that shows a different level of gratitude, that we've seen here. It's something you don't really understand until you've read through the series a little bit more. But also, when Jason already has some, and Rufus is like, "Really, you have essences? You just found them all in a day?" I think that
Mhm.
moment, Rufus is like, he's like on to him. Rufus knows something's going on. He's like, you didn't just find essences, you're getting essences somehow. So we need
Right.
to figure out what's going on. So it's like a twofold, like, hey, you're extraordinarily suspicious, but this is how grateful I am.
So not only is it Rufus showing he's grateful, though, it's Rufus acknowledging that Jason has mad potential. Like, if a regular adventurer would have came in and saved him, he wouldn't be offering, oh, let me give you a bunch of essences and do all this, and even if another normal rank, just basic person was helpful to him in some way, probably wouldn't, go to all this trouble. I think it's also the potential that he sees in Jason that pushes him towards that, desire to like, oh dude, I've like really got to help you out because like you got the stuff.
Yeah. Oh yeah, like he recognizes in Jason, and I have that written down a little bit, like right at the end of this chapter too. Just after the blah 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 blah. Blah. Like he absolutely recognizes what Jason can do, what his potential is, and wants to help him fulfill that. And whether this is a secondary, I'll teach you because you already have essences, or if it's you have like we're gonna get you essences and we're gonna train you.
Right.
It's a thing in my mind.
And I like when they're talking about that too. I like the line that Rufus tells Jason, where he's like, "Life is hard, Outworlder, and you are soft."
Yes, that's the exact one that I have here, because that is the first time that we see Rufus go full teacher mode. I believe this is the moment that Rufus decides, I am going to mentor this kid. I am going to show him
Right.
and teach him and make him survive. It's in this moment because he abandons all of the joviality he had earlier. All of the banter. It's just this world is very hard, and you are very soft. We're gonna fix that. Because this is right after they had run through the desert to get to the estate, and Jason, being carried, almost died of heat exhaustion.
Right. And another point in Gary's corner, by the way, dude hasn't even broken a sweat while wearing full armor. Or no, he wasn't wearing the armor yet. He puts the armor on after.
Yeah, he had full length clothes, and he's covered in hair.
Right.
And just not even a drop of sweat.
Yeah, and I really liked it though. Like just to see, what essences and what being an essence user really means. Like they literally just trekked at like surface street speeds on foot, and they're like, oh man, I'm a bit parched. I could use a little drink.
Yeah. Well, and that actually brings us to a more philosophical question that I had for you. Because while this is all going on, they're topping up stamina potions. Gary's fine. Jason's on the ground unintelligibly using consonants. And he's questioning. He's like, why are you guys like this? And I'm almost dead from being carried. And we get a little bit of a description into the recovery attribute, upper level bronze recovery. But they ask, Rufus asks, do you know anything about the attributes? And the only one that Jason remembers is power, right? He's like, one of them's strength, I think, right? And this caught my eye, and I was questioning with you, is power the only one that he remembered of the list, because that's the one thing he needs most of? Is this like a hint to will to power type thing? Or is it just because that's the first ability on the list and that's the only one he can remember because it was first?
I'm definitely going to go with option B there, because all day he's just been running from one problem to the next. And he really hasn't actually had time to sit down and process anything yet, let alone break down his newfound powers and abilities. It's just some stuff that's being thrown in his face and he's reading. So I definitely think, at least on my end, I view it as he's just he's just read that, and that's like the one thing he remembers because it's a piece of information that he happened to remember in his crazy ass day.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
So at this point, they're getting ready to go into the actual Vane estate.
Mm-hmm.
And a cool piece of like scenery and setting that we get in terms of like magic description is the magic field that is keeping the Vane estate as like a nice chill climate, very green grass, but literally just an oasis in the middle of the desert.
Yeah.
And it's this essentially idyllic little spot, except you go in and it's nothing but cannibals killing people.
That's fair. Well, and to that effect, like not only is this the first time we really see uh, a greater magic array in work in this world, reading through it, even the several times that I did, it wasn't until now that I realized that the estate is actually a lot bigger than I initially pictured. Because we've seen the house and the hedge maze, the well and stuff. No, when they enter into this estate, they cross the barrier and they have to go through an entire forest. Like it's a massive forest that surrounds the thing. It's got creeks and brooks and clearings, and everything. It's just like an actual forest leading into this estate. I never imagined the scope of the estate itself.
I did not catch that. I 100% have imagined it as like essentially, like a 5-bedroom house in the desert with like a front and a backyard kind of situation.
Yeah, no. As soon as they cross the border, it's like an edge of grass going around it, and then they walk into a forest and they follow the trails through the forest, through the creeks. As mentioned, the babbling creeks and all of the trees and the thin cut paths through it, and then they come out onto a massive field, and that's basically the front lawn for the estate. It's just this big old field with a river, and then the hedge maze is off somewhere over here.
Oh, that's crazy.
Yeah, like it's a full-on mansion in the middle of a field, in the middle of a forest, in the middle of the desert.
That's insane. Yeah, I did. I was not picturing it like that at all. It was 100% just like a much smaller, literal oasis is what I was picturing.
Yeah, that's what I thought of. I've gone through the series 4 times now, and only when I was reading for this podcast was I like, yo, there's a forest? And then it actually clicked what that meant. I'm like, dude, this place is big.
Well, not only is it big, that kind of changes the vibe in my mind of like how it feels when they're approaching. Because like in my mind, they're approaching just like a nice little house with, nice little yard and stuff. Honestly, the forest alone makes it feel a lot more threatening. Like if you want to come here, you gotta go through at least something. And they may have just been lucky to not run into anything in that situation.
Right. Especially knowing we have carnivorous plants out there. There's probably some bloodthirsty animals. But on the same note, it's very likely that the only reason that the cultists didn't see them coming was because of the forest. It might have provided them enough cover to sneak up on the house,
Yeah.
So good and bad coming with it.
Right, like they use it as protection, but it ends up being their downfall.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it was just something I picked out that I thought was interesting.
That is interesting. Well, now that we know they get through a forest, after they get out of the forest and get onto the land, like onto the actual property, like Jason is kind of like, oh, well, maybe I don't want to go in. And Rufus is like, you want to stay here by yourself?
Yeah. Dude, this is actually a very Scooby-Doo moment for me. Because I watched a lot of Scooby-Doo growing up, and Shaggy and Scooby are always like, well, we're not going in the scary house. It's like, man, I don't want to go into the haunted house. And Fred's like, well, fine, we'll go. You guys stay here alone. They're like, on second thought,
yeah,
we'll be right there.
This does feel like that moment for sure.
Yeah, it's like, I get it. Like, I'm not really good in a fight. Do you guys really want me in there? And they're like, do you really want to be alone? And that like flips the script back. He's like, you're right. I am not an asset. You are protecting me.
uh,
But I mean, there's really no need at this point because this is where we meet Anisa.
yes, we do. Well, we've met her before, but we get to see her again.
Yes, we do. In all her glory.
And at this point, Jason is in shambles, basically dead almost from his entire day and then trek through the desert. And if it doesn't signify she's a bad guy right off the bat, she's like hesitant to heal him. And it's like,
Right.
yo, like you are in a perfectly fine condition right now. You have no reason to not help who is literally your team right now. Your party is asking you for help. And she like makes a fuss about it.
Right. She's like, first of all, chases a cultist out a window and then kills him with death orbs. Walks up to the party and it's like, hey, you guys are good. Yeah. Yeah. Like, I expected you guys to get free. Whatever. Who's this vagrant over here? And it's like, he's with us. Heal him. And she's like, heal the peasant? All right, what's the matter with you?
Right.
Bro. Yeah, no, she is absolutely moody. It's like, if it's like gonna put her out, a healer, to heal somebody. Not only that, she's a priestess, a healing priestess. Her job and entire reason for being is to heal. And to heal those who can't heal themselves.
Well, she's a member of the Church of Purity, though, not the Church of Healer. Granted, not that the Church of Healer would have been that much better at this point anyway, but she views Jason as unclean, so I mean, she obviously doesn't want to help him based on her bias, which I'm sure is theoretically how she could have explained away her hesitancy, but in my mind, it indicates guilt. And another thing that indicates guilt, maybe I got this wrong, but when they get to the estate, is she already just running around free?
Yeah, I had that noted too. So when they get to the estate, the first thing we see is a cultist jumping out of a second-story window and running away from the estate. And then her standing at the window like, yeah, you think you can get away? And uses essence abilities to kill him. From a distance, by the way.
Right.
Yeah, I'm sitting here like, presumably, the only thing that makes sense to me with the reason she has her collar off and is running around, at this stage in the book, the only thing I can think of is, well, they were about to cook her because Derek wanted to try an elf. And so they took her collar off to kill her, which I cannot possibly imagine a cannibal cult of this longevity ever making that mistake.
Right. So that would be the only in-house feasible explanation. However, we know in future that Anisa is not who she seems to be, got some other stuff going on, and is actually working alongside these people. Like it was like they were freeing her.
Right. Well, and it's hard to really pinpoint throughout the series what actually happened here. Because we know that in the long run they're there, so she's basically there to clear out the cult so that the builder cult can take over the property and use it as a base of operations, and Purity is working with him in this effect.
Right.
And we know that Landemir was in on it, so it's very possible that when she got captured, Landemir had given her a key to the suppression collar so that she could free herself. I don't think the vast majority of the cultists in this area are aligned with the builder cult. I don't even think they know what's going on. But somehow
Right, 'cause, yeah,
she got free.
I was gonna say when Cressida mentioned seeing Landomir's like whole situation blown up in his face, she's like, told him to stop messing around with stupid stuff. So she wasn't involved in any capacity.
Yeah.
Anisa, however, definitely got some stuff going on. And like another note I have here is that clean indicates guilt, because she is like, she's clean. She's wearing nice clothes. She's feeling good, nice white purity robes or whatever it is she wears on. And like those were the two things that stood out to me. She's like wearing perfectly clean clothes and she's just running around when they show up. Like, well, wait a minute. She was dragged off, to be murdered.
So, to be fair, as fair as you can be, the fact that she's wearing clean robes, I don't think means anything at all. Because if you think about it, every member of the clergy of purity that we see throughout the entire series, whenever they're in their purity robes, it's always 100% perfectly clean and perfectly white. Purity is kind of their thing. There's no filth. I would not at all be surprised if all of their clothes are enchanted to resist all kinds of debris and detritus. So I don't think it's possible for her battle robes to get dirty because she's a priest of purity. I don't think it's even possible.
Okay, that's okay. I'll give you that. I completely walked over the fact that she's a purity priestess. I literally wrote down clean indicates guilt. Like, no, clean indicates purity.
Yeah. As bad as that sounds. Yeah.
All right. Well.
Oh, I did just think of something. We're backtracking a little bit, but I did think of something when it comes to Anisa healing Jason. Yeah. So just a question that I had for you because I couldn't come up with an answer. When they asked her to heal Jason, Gary comes up and he's like, "Yeah, we've been pumping him full of potions, but he could use a top off, a little healing spell." And as we just went over, that's not at all what happened. He's under mana toxicity because he took 2 gold spirit coins back to back and then try and drink a potion, but the toxicity wasn't due to the potion, it was due to the spirit coins. So they haven't given anything but water, so this is just straight up a lie. My question is, why would Gary lie about the situation to her specifically?
I mean, honestly, the Gary we see in the series is a very intelligent and observant character. And I think he sees that Anisa, she's not really on their side. And so I think the lie is just like he knows she's not going to want to do this. So he's just going to lie to her to essentially prompt her to be like, "Hey man, we're doing everything we can. We need your help, because otherwise I think, if she knew that a healing potion or something would work, she would have been like, give him a potion. I'm not going to help."
That's fair. That's fair.
Yeah.
To be like, yeah, like he's got mana toxicity because we've been trying to heal him, but we could use a healing spell. I think that makes sense,
Yeah,
just cutting off we'll just give him a potion and call it a day discussion.
Exactly. And I feel, like I said, I feel like the Gary we know is 100% on Jason's side, and also I think intelligent and observant enough to know that Anisa is not actually really their ally. And so he's like, I'm gonna have to say something to coerce her to do something, because otherwise she's gonna just tell him to kick rocks.
Fair enough. All right, I'm satisfied with that answer.
I also, though, like during that same moment, to stay on that backtrack, how when Jason notices her using her death orbs, and then they're like, "Oh yeah, she's the healer." And he's like astonished that like this lady with crazy death powers could be a healer, and it essentially, at least in some degree, becomes part of his identity to be the guy with the crazy powers who also heals people.
Right. I had noted that it's very similar to Neil's power set later on too. Because like he's the healer of Jason's team, and yet he has a power to flood the entire area with death energy. So it's just like kill everything around you, but also am healer. And Jason's very similar, kill everything, but also am healer.
Kinda. He's
To be fair,
more
Jason minor heals, but
yeah. I mean, like
yeah.
if it was D&D, he'd be a bard with like healing word or something, effectively. But
Yeah. Yeah.
he's not prioritizing healing magic. It's just like an effect that he ends up with. But
Yeah. Basically the opposite of Anisa, if you think about it, because instead of healing everything with death power, it's killing everything with healing power.
that's that's a good point. Now back on Anisa,
Yes.
and all the cult stuff. So once they regroup with her, essentially they're like, all right, we're about to go raid this, and we're gonna go pillage this thing. And she's like, no, you're not gonna do that. And she makes like a big fuss about them not like breaking stuff. And it is mentioned that like, oh well, her church wants it, but we know that her church is tied to the builder. So essentially she's like protecting what the builder wants, and not actually like, oh, I'm doing this for my church. Like, no, you're just like doing this. um and I guess what I wonder is like, why even bother saving any of this stuff? Like what, like, on what need does the builder need the art on the walls or whatnot? You know what I mean?
Well, I'm certain that, Anissa's presence there is not limited to the builder cult's wishes. Like I'm sure she is there, you know, very heavily to track down and eliminate the blood cult, for her church, and the builder cult is a secondary objective for her. It's like if you're going mining for gold, you're not going to look at diamonds and be like, we don't fucking need that. It's like you're going to get that too.
Right.
But, so this being a major base of operations for the blood cult, I feel like means that everything inside of it can be used for her church, and she can further a secondary goal of her church, and if the other churches, the other branches of the Purity Church, who maybe aren't as linked to the builder at this point in time, are like, hey, what happened over there? She can be like, look at all this stuff I got on the blood cult. You're welcome.
Mm-hmm.
And be like,
That's a
yeah,
good
you guys are
point.
doing great work. Keep it up. Yep, you keep doing it. On the other hand, Farah and Gary are very fire-based people, and anything they accidentally destroy could just burn the entire place to the ground, which she also doesn't want.
That's
It's like you
fair.
can't destroy anything because one thing could be everything.
That's true, and I hadn't thought about specifically Farah. I mean, I don't know if Gary does he actually have fire powers.
He has forge powers, which are heavily reliant on fire, which we see when he dons his armor. His armor is basically just a suit of armor with a forge in the middle. So he's got fire inside of his armor, and it
Oh,
radiates heat. His summon, his golem, his forge golem, is basically just a walking forge,
got you. But like, does it deal fire damage though? That's the question.
Yeah, we see later on in the series this forge golem has got the cavity in his chest where he opens up the doors of his chest and just spews fiery coals over everything.
Oh,
It's
that's
just
fair.
a massive fire blast out of its chest.
That's
Which
fair, yeah.
this brings me to a point that we were talking about last
Mm.
episode. So when they, skipping ahead a little bit, when they decide that they're going to search the grounds for other cultists, and it has been decided that Gary and Farah will search the outside specifically, they summon up their summons. Farah's lava beast and Gary's forge golem, and it's actually specifically mentioned that they let the summons scout ahead, several yards ahead, because of the heat that they produce. It's very uncomfortable being near
Mm.
them. Like they have to go way over there because of how hot they are. And this just reminded me of our conversation that we had about, lava powers in an enclosed space not being a big deal.
That's right.
I was like, hey, we were just talking about that. And these
That
things
is
are
right.
hot, but Terra's lava isn't?
Well, except you made a valid case that it was, and it was
Yeah.
just being
Yeah, that's fair.
directed and whatnot. But I think Sherloon's a really attentive author, so
Yeah.
I think he has thought of stuff like this.
Oh, for sure. There is one other mention that I wanted to bring up when it came to the summons. Um, so we have what I believe is on the same lines of that's hurtful from a writing perspective, from a series perspective. Um, they're when they're told to scout the outside, Rufus goes, make sure you don't cause any unnecessary damage, right? While you're out looking for things. Anything that's not bolted down you can take, but don't damage anything, right? And so
Right.
they're out scouting, and Jason brings up the point, like when they're burning through the hedge maze, burning a path through the hedge maze. He was like, I don't really think you were supposed to do that. And Gary brings up, like, hey, he said to flush it out. He didn't say how. And Jason goes, well, he did say no unnecessary damage. This means you. And the very next line of that paragraph is one that, again, every character at some point says through the series and gets echoed on throughout. And Gary says, whose side are you on? And then Jason goes, justice. And we
Yeah,
see
for
that a lot.
real.
Everybody at some point says, whose side are you on? And for a few books, the answer is justice. And then there's a couple of switches, a couple different answers that comes it. But like
Yeah,
you
yeah,
hear this and Farah in like the next is it like the next two chapters, Farah says that same exact thing. So
Oh
it's kind of
yeah.
crazy. There are a few lines through the series that echo through the series, and this is just one of them.
And it's funny because as of right now, book 12 has been out for a week. And I haven't finished it yet, but that reference pops up in book 12, like in the first,
Oh yeah.
I don't know, few hours of the book. It pops up, and they literally, he makes the justice comment.
Yeah. Whose side are you
Um,
on? Justice. Yeah.
yeah,
No, it's just one of those things that carries on.
it is. And I mean, he Sherloon is good with that. He likes to carry his jokes on book to book, and even if they don't get mentioned very soon, they usually get mentioned again somewhere along the line, and it's always in the right little neat spot to make you giggle. So I love that.
Yeah, he does it so artfully, it's like a continuation of a joke, but it's funny every time. And it's so well crafted.
Yes, it is. All right. So before we wrap up, I've got nothing left to say about Anisa. Well, nothing nice to say anyway. You got anything else?
Mm-hmm. No, aside from how she's so incredibly sus at this point, nah, I think we've covered everything. It's a brief interaction with Anisa and the team, broad strokes speaking, but
Yeah.
yeah, I think we've covered everything in these chapters.
Yeah, and I mean, she'll make an appearance later. We're definitely going to get more of her especially I think in books 2 and 3, she makes at least book 2, she makes a bit of an appearance,
Yeah,
and we get a little deeper into the Anisa lore. So now that we can leave her behind for the time being, I just had a fun little thought experiment for you. We started with the thought experiment. Let's end with the thought experiment.
let's do it.
Um, lately, I've been getting really into this etymology podcast with the YouTuber Rob Words, and it's had me thinking that Jason is inherently speaking a language that he doesn't speak. Like his system software is translating for him. He is naturally speaking the language, but in his mind, he's just speaking English, talking normally. And so in my mind, it makes me wonder what the Palimustis language even sounds like.
That is an interesting thought. I don't think we ever get to a point in the series where we actually get to hear the Palamustan language, or really get it described to us. I mean, in chapter, what is it, 17, 16 here, see a little bit about his translation ability. There's a little offhand, you didn't even realize you were doing it, did you? And he gets to really concentrate on what he's saying and the sounds coming out of his mouth, realizes
Right.
they're absolutely not English. But that's as far as we get. We don't have any bearing for what this language actually sounds like. And it's just we're just assuming it's the common tongue of this area, because we know that this world has
Right.
multiple languages, just like Earth does. Um, so yeah, I have no idea what it would sound like.
Um, right. Yeah, I realize I generalized by calling it the Palimustis language. I would be calling it like, oh, what does the Earth language sound like? Um,
Yeah, I'm sure you could narrow it down to like the most common tongue, in Palimustis. Uh, whatever that happens to be. It would be like speaking common in D&D, or
right.
speaking English or Spanish on Earth. The majority of people know a language. That would be what we can
Right.
assume that they're speaking.
Right. Um, I think it would be fun though to see if Shirtaloon has put any thought into that, because like Tolkien and George R. R. Martin and quite a few other fantasy authors have written languages out for their series, and it'd be kind of interesting to get the language of Rimaros or whatever it may be, like or
Yeah,
Greenstone or whatever. And I mean, we could well, so we could try and extrapolate like Greenstone's supposed to be in North Africa, so maybe they've got a very percussive language or something like that. But that's on the thought process that humans moved around the planet in the same way that they did on Earth, which is not likely.
right. And I think you know the developing of language is so specific, even on Earth, that I don't think,
Hmm.
regardless of where the Earth equivalent would be, I don't think they would have the similar type of like speaking.
Right.
I think maybe after we get the final Jason arc, the eventual end to this main series, um, we might get a secondary book like Tolkien did with the history of Middle Earth. We get a
Mm.
little bit more on the languages and the people and the races and stuff, just kind of more basic information on the world building. But we're gonna have to wait a while for that. I do think it
We
would be cool to
are.
see though. So Shirtlein, if you're watching, let us know if you got any plans for that.
Yeah, that'd be really cool. And I mean, I'm just I'm just a nerd about languages, so it would just be
Oh yeah.
fun to it'd be fun to find, another new one to look into and never actually learn because I don't dedicate enough time.
Oh no!
But
If we get a Palimustan language, we are learning it, and then
well,
we can
we'd have to
redo the
now.
whole podcast in Palimustas.
Oh, dude, that'd be fantastic.
Dude,
All right.
keep an eye out, everybody. 10 years down the line, this whole podcast is getting a new language.
Hell yeah, we are updating. That way we can send it over to Palimustis when Jason repairs the link between worlds.
Yes, and they can enjoy a little bit of Earth humor.
Yeah, 100%. They'll be ready, and they will be watching our He Who Writes with Monsters podcast that is eerily similar to the events of their own lives.
Indeed. Well, I think that'll do it for this episode. Yeah.
Yes, sir. I think that's one in the bag again. Join us next week where we're going to be covering chapters 18 through 20. And we're going to be talking all about how Jason is going to get the actual call to adventure.
Yes, we are going to deep dive hard into, his choices of staying in this world, what he can do, becoming an adventurer. We look really hard at his essences and the introduction into the magic system. What we've done so far is just kind of scratching the surface. We're actually going to get into it next time and do our best to help you understand this amazing system of magic that they have.
Absolutely. And I cannot wait to get into the meat of it because this is like at least for you specifically is where you like your time to shine with the magic system. I know you've been doing your research and notes and all that on it. So this is your time to shine.
Yes, and we will do our best to help you understand it. For those of you who maybe love the series but don't quite get it, for those of you that are like me and absolutely love the magic and the working out of it, and other DMs out there, even, we're gonna have fun together.
Absolutely, and don't feel too bad because I love this series, but I can't even with this magic system because it's a lot and I don't have the attention span. But it is going to be fun to listen to Donnie talk about it. And I'm going to learn
Yeah.
at least something or other.
Yeah, if you don't come around learning something, I've failed as a partner.
Yes, and a teacher. And a father.
And a teacher. Yeah. We'll find out next time.
All right. Well, till next time, I've been D. Allen.
And I've been Donnie B. Remember to go follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, X, and wherever you get your podcasts.
Yes, sir. Y'all have a good one.